Okay, so this time you guys have really thrown us for a loop with this one,
Yeah.
Francisco Franco,
Mm.
through the lens of the Enneagram.
Yeah.
I am intrigued, to say the least.
Yeah.
You've sent over some articles that seem to peg him as a social 3 or the achiever.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit my Enneagram knowledge is a little rusty, so
Sure.
can we start there?
Yeah. So the Enneagram is a system of 9 interconnected personality types. And the social 3, the achiever, as it's called,
Okay.
is often, someone who is very driven, very image conscious, and always striving for success.
When you say image conscious, what exactly does that mean for a social 3? Is it just about like,
Yeah.
you know, looking good?
It's more than just looking good. It's more about a deep-seated need for validation,
Mm.
a need for external recognition of their accomplishments.
Okay.
Success for them is not just a goal, it's how they measure their worth.
Mm.
They are often incredibly charismatic, adaptable, and always striving to present the best version of themselves to the world.
I'm starting to see how this might connect to Franco.
Yeah.
I mean, his rise to power was nothing short of meteoric.
Right.
Youngest general in Europe, leading a coup, then ruling Spain for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
That's a pretty impressive resume, even if you leave out the whole dictator part.
Exactly. And when you look back at his early life, you see this pattern sort of emerging.
Okay.
One of the articles you sent mentioned his almost obsessive focus on military achievements, even as a young cadet.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't just about serving his country. It was about excelling, about being recognized as the best.
So even back then, he was crafting this image of the successful, driven leader.
Right.
I mean, it makes you wonder, was it always about power, or was power just a means to achieve that recognition he craved?
It's a fascinating question, and the Enneagram doesn't give us all the answers, but it can offer some pretty interesting insights.
Okay.
For a social 3, that need for validation can be so powerful that it shapes their choices, their relationships, even their entire worldview.
And speaking of shaping worldviews, Franco was a master at controlling his image.
Right.
You see it in the meticulously tailored uniforms, the grand public appearances.
Yes.
Even the way he positioned himself within the Catholic Church, it was all very carefully orchestrated.
And that's classic social 3 behavior.
Okay.
They are masters of self-presentation, always aware of how they're being perceived.
Right.
It's not necessarily about being fake or anything like that. It's about presenting the most successful, competent version of themselves to the world.
But it's not just about appearances, right? This need for control seems to have extended to every aspect of his rule.
Absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting, because for a social 3, that need for validation can sometimes morph into a need for control. They start to believe that if they can control their environment, control their image, even control the narrative of history itself, they can ultimately control how they are perceived and in turn their own sense of worth.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But wasn't there also an element of pragmatism to his control? I mean, he was ruling a country, navigating all these complex political landscapes.
Sure.
Surely it wasn't all driven by this need for validation.
Right. Of course, it's never quite that simple.
Yeah.
But let's look at how he navigated World War II, for example. Initially, he seemed to favor the Axis powers, but then as the war turned, he very skillfully shifted to a position of neutrality.
He was quite the chameleon, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Always seeming to play both sides.
Right.
Hedging his bets.
And that adaptability is another hallmark of the social 3.
Okay.
They're incredibly adept at reading the room, sensing which way the wind is blowing, and adjusting their approach accordingly. It's not necessarily about lacking conviction or anything like that. It's about achieving their goals, whatever those goals may be, in the most effective way possible.
So in Franco's case, the goal might have been staying in power. Maintaining that image of the strong, stable leader no matter what was happening around him.
Precisely. And that's where that need for control and that adaptability really converged.
Yeah.
He wasn't just reacting to events. He was actively shaping them, manipulating perceptions to ensure that he remained at the center of the narrative.
And he was remarkably successful at it, ruling Spain for almost 40 years through war, economic upheaval, and massive social change.
Right.
It's hard to deny his political acumen, but what about the personal side of things?
Yeah.
Did this constant drive for achievement, for external validation, did it come at a cost? I mean, makes you wonder, doesn't it, if behind that carefully constructed facade of the confident leader, if there was this deep-seated fear of failure lurking.
It's definitely a possibility and actually a common struggle for social threes.
Yeah.
Remember, their sense of self-worth is often tied to these external achievements and this recognition.
Right.
So the fear of not measuring up, of being exposed as a fraud, that can be a powerful motivator.
So all that control, that iron grip on power,
Yeah.
could it have been a way to shield himself from that fear?
Absolutely. For a social three, any threat to their carefully crafted image, any hint of failure, can feel like an existential crisis. It's not surprising that someone like Franco, operating in the high-stakes world of politics, would go to great lengths to maintain that image of strength and control.
We've talked a lot about his image and control.
Yeah.
But what about these other aspects of being a social three?
Sure.
Did those manifest in Franco's life as well?
Oh, definitely. One of the key traits of a social three is their adaptability.
Yeah.
They are masters of reading the room, adjusting their approach to fit the situation, and charming their way to success. And we see this throughout Franco's life. For instance, one of the articles you sent mentions how he effortlessly navigated the complex social circles of pre-war Spain. Building alliances and consolidating power.
So it wasn't just about brute force. He was a shrewd operator, using his social skills to his advantage.
Exactly.
It reminds me of how he embraced certain aspects of modernization later in his rule, seemingly adapting to the changing times.
Exactly. Remember, for a social three, it's not about clinging to ideology at all costs. It's about achieving their goals. And if that means evolving, adapting their message, even embracing seemingly contradictory viewpoints, they're willing to do it as long as it maintains their position and their image of success.
It makes me think about the Valley of the Fallen, that massive monument he commissioned. It was ostensibly a tribute to all those who died in the Spanish Civil War, but it also served to cement his legacy, to control how history would remember him.
That's a perfect example of how a social three's desire for validation can extend even beyond their lifetime. They crave a lasting legacy, a recognition of their achievements that transcends their own mortality.
But surely there had to be some personal cost to this relentless pursuit of success, this image.
Sure.
Did he ever allow himself to be vulnerable?
It's hard to say. That's where things get a little tricky. One of the potential pitfalls for a social three is that they can become so focused on their public persona that they lose touch with their true selves. They may struggle with intimacy, fearing that true vulnerability could damage their carefully crafted image.
So even in his personal life, it was all about control, about presenting a certain image to the world.
It's a possibility, and one that's worth exploring further. Another article you sent mentions how Franco, despite being married, kept his personal life incredibly private. Some historians believe he might have had other relationships, but he went to great lengths to keep them hidden from public view.
Almost as if any hint of scandal, any crack in that perfect facade could bring his whole carefully constructed world crashing down.
Exactly. For a social three, maintaining that image is paramount. It's the foundation of their self-worth, their identity. And that can lead to a lot of internal pressure, a constant fear of being exposed, of failing to live up to the image they've created.
It makes you wonder, what was he like behind closed doors, when the cameras were off and the crowds were gone? Was there a genuine Francisco Franco, or was it all just a performance?
That's a question we may never fully answer, but by understanding the dynamics of the social three personality, we can start to piece together a more nuanced picture of this complex and often contradictory figure.
It's amazing how a system like the Enneagram can shed light on the inner workings of someone like Franco. Someone who, on the surface, seems so enigmatic, so larger than life.
And that's what makes it such a valuable tool for understanding not just historical figures, but ourselves as well. It's a reminder that we all have these patterns, these core motivations that shape our choices and relationships. And by becoming aware of them, we can start to make more conscious decisions, live more authentically, and break free from the limitations of our own personality traps.
Speaking of breaking free, Franco's regime eventually came to an end, as all regimes do. What can we learn from his final years in power? How did the social three tendencies play out as he faced his own mortality and legacy?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about how the social three tendencies, that deep need for control and validation,
Hmm.
how might that have played out as Franco faced his own mortality?
Well, one of the articles you sent highlights his growing obsession with his legacy in his later years.
Oh, okay.
He poured immense resources into projects like the Valley of the Fallen,
Right.
almost as if he was trying to physically solidify his place in history.
Yeah, it's almost like he was trying to control how future generations would perceive him, even from beyond the grave. Exactly. And it makes sense when you consider the social three's core fear, becoming irrelevant, being forgotten.
Right.
For someone like Franco, who had spent his life building this image of the strong, successful leader,
Yeah.
fading into obscurity would have been the ultimate failure.
And as his health declined, did he try to maintain that image of control?
Yeah.
Did he ever acknowledge his vulnerability?
From the accounts I read, it seems like he clung to power with an iron grip until the very end.
Wow.
He was reluctant to relinquish control, even as his body weakened. One could argue that this unwavering determination was part of what made him such an effective leader, but in his final years,
Right.
it might have also prevented him from confronting his own mortality with true honesty.
It makes you wonder what was going through his mind in those days. Did he have any regrets?
Yeah.
Did he ever question the choices he had made?
Unfortunately, we can only speculate, but the Enneagram offers a compelling lens through which to view those questions.
Oh.
For a social three, acknowledging failure,
Right.
admitting weakness, can be incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Their entire sense of self-worth is built on this foundation of success and achievement.
Right.
So confronting those darker aspects of their past might have been an almost impossible task.
So in a way, his personality, those deeply ingrained social three tendencies, might have prevented him from finding true peace or reconciliation at the end of his life.
It's a heartbreaking thought, but a plausible one.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the importance of self-awareness, of understanding our own patterns and motivations.
Right.
Because the Enneagram isn't just a tool for analyzing others.
No way.
It's a mirror to hold up to ourselves.
Right.
It's about recognizing our own potential pitfalls, our own shadow sides, so that we can make more conscious choices and live more authentically.
It's a powerful reminder that even someone as seemingly powerful and in control as Franco was ultimately a human being, shaped by his experiences, his personality, and yes, his fears.
And in the end, isn't that what makes history so compelling?
Yeah.
It's not just a collection of dates and events.
Right.
It's a tapestry woven from the lives of individuals, each with their own unique story to tell.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot to think about today.
Yeah.
Francisco Franco, the Spanish dictator, seen through the lens of the Enneagram. It's a fascinating and often unsettling journey into the heart of power, ambition, and the human need for validation.
It's a journey that doesn't offer easy answers, but it does encourage us to ask deeper questions.
Yeah.
Not just about the figures who shaped history, but about ourselves. What drives us?
Right.
What are we afraid of?
Yeah.
And how can we use that self-awareness to live more fulfilling and meaningful lives?
Those are questions worth pondering indeed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
Of course.
We hope it's given you a new perspective on Francisco Franco.
Yeah.
And perhaps even sparked some introspection about your own journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.